Hello and welcome. This is the For the Fans podcast. My name is Justin Melillo. Kevin McAdams is alongside. It's a Tuesday night that we're doing this recording on. Kevin, how are you tonight?
Well, as many of you know, I am a gym fanatic. I am what you call what are those people called a gym rat. Um, just got done with the gym. Just got done with work. How are you, Justin? I don't know about you, but I really enjoyed what I saw this week at Chicago.
I'm good. I'm a little bit tired despite my day off being today. I worked at my first job in the morning, as I always do, and came home, took a nap, and I just had so much work that I needed to catch up on around the house. And here I am now, around 10 o'clock at night, ready to do this with you. And talk about the weekend that was at Chicagoland Speedway. We got a full plate of racing on the agenda to talk about. We've got the Truck Series. We've got the Xfinity Series. We've got the Cup Series. All three at Chicagoland Speedway. And all three were pretty decent races from what I can tell. I know that I didn't get to watch as much racing as I wanted to over the weekend, but from what I saw, it was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I watched as much as I could of the trucks and Xfinity race. I watched the whole Cup race, and it got an A from me, especially with the way the package is. It's Chicagoland has become, I guess, what we had in the early 2010s, up until maybe 2 or 3 years ago with Auto Club. It's probably the second best mile and a half. It's probably the second best speedway on our schedule, and it's a shame that just like what I consider the best speedway on the schedule, Homestead, it's a shame that they only go there once. I really do think that they should go there twice, and I hope with maybe the new schedule they'll have some kind of agreement to go there twice instead of maybe somewhere else. So I really enjoyed this week. I really enjoyed the trucks. I really enjoyed Xfinity, even though Custer pretty much dominated, and I was ecstatic, really, really excited to see a first-time winner in Alex Bowman. So we'll get to all of that, but first we'll get to the truck race. Let's see what we got to do today. Let's get it on.
Well, yes, the trucks were the first series, the first national touring series in NASCAR that hit the track at Chicagoland. The first series to actually race was the ARCA series. I'll touch on that later. But the trucks, they're going to be the first ones we talk about. Brett Moffitt, he picked up his second win of the season. His first time that he crossed the line first, but he had an unsponsored vehicle, which was concerning to me, but despite not having a logo on the hood, he still was able to bring it home P1 at Chicagoland after 150 laps. He bested Brandon Jones, who was driving that very much, that 51 truck. It wins a lot, but when, talented drivers are in it. Brandon Jones was able to bring it home in second. Stuart Friesen, he came home third. Harrison Burton, fourth. And Austin Hill, who started on the pole, he brought it home in fifth. The race itself, there were a couple cautions here and there. Jordan Anderson spun at one point. Natalie Decker got turned at one point. There was an incident involving a couple of trucks in the third stage at a turn 4.
Yeah,
so
Finger was involved. He was one of the top runners up in the first or second stage. So it's crazy.
yeah, Infinger had actually won stage 2 and then turned right around and wrecked to begin stage 3, which was it was pretty sad to see, because I felt like Enfinger definitely had one of the best trucks on the night, and it would have been cool to see him and Moffitt and Jones, because I felt like those were the three best trucks in the event on Friday night. It would have been interesting to see the dynamic, to see how they raced one another. But Enfinger suffered a lot of damage in that third stage incident with the 44 and the 22, it looks like, were involved, and those were driven by Spencer Davis and by Austin Wayne Self. So, all in all, not a bad way to start the weekend. Like I said, Brett Moffitt, he brought it into victory lane. It was the second time this season that he collected the victory. But as I said before, it was the first time that he did it by crossing the line first.
Yeah, I mean, it was weird because Moffitt really didn't show up until probably halfway through stage two. He finished third at the end of stage two. It was definitely a tale of Enfinger is just crazy consistent, even with his damage. He finished 2 laps down, and he finished 16th. That's probably one of his worst finishes of the year, if not the worst finish of the year for him. So I mean, it's crazy that he's got so many top 10, so finishing outside that is just a shock for me to see. Obviously he had damage. Brandon Jones actually impressed me in that 51. He impressed me all week, despite not winning any of the races on the weekend. He won stage one, and he did it in a pretty interesting fashion. He passed Enfinger on the last lap of stage one, which you really don't see late in the runs. Most of the time, the winner of the stage, for the most part, is pulled away, 2 second lead, especially in the trucks. There's always like a distinct dominant guy in the first stage or two. Enfinger and Jones being the top two in both stage one and stage two, and then of course Moffitt in third. So I mean, I'm with you 100%. I would have loved to see the 24, the 51, and the 98 up there. I think having Enfinger up there would have made it a lot more exciting to the end, especially Jones. I don't know if he just lost a lot of momentum entering or exiting the pits, but he lost a lot more time than I anticipated on that final stop because he pitted a little bit later, and I thought, well, maybe – I don't know if he pitted later or earlier, but I thought he would be able to run him down just because he had a long run truck, and he just didn't work. He pretty much was stagnant at 3.5 to 4 seconds the last half of that final run to the checker. So I mean, Moffitt, I was honestly really impressed that he even got back up there, just because he got that damage with Austin Wayne Self down the backstretch about I think it was like 20 to go in stage two, and I thought that was it for him. I thought he was maybe going to limp around to a top 10 just because he's in a really damn good truck, but he pulls out the win, and in not I wouldn't say an unsponsored truck, but let's call it unsponsored because it basically had GMS all over the back in the deck lid and on the sides. It was, for lack of better purposes, an unsponsored truck, and then you got Jones and the Kyle Busch machine. Like I said, he didn't win, but I was actually pretty impressed, all things considered. It doesn't surprise me not to see him win. He's never really shown that killer instinct talent yet. He's still young by our standards. He's 22, 23 years old. He's still young, but man, he needs to step it on up here in the next couple of years if he wants to stay around.
Jones, currently running for the Xfinity Series Championship, has had the last couple seasons. He's been in the Xfinity Series with a couple different teams. RCR he ran a couple of years with before he moved over to Joe Gibbs Racing, and even one of the years where he was with Richard Childress Racing, he ended up missing the playoffs. So, he when he first came into the series, like into NASCAR itself, it looked like he had a shot at winning. It looked like he could win. But like still today, he's still just he's unpolished. He isn't able to put a full race together to find his way to victory lane. Yeah, I'll give it to him that the pass at the end of stage one, definitely, I got to give him props for it because it's difficult to do at any time, especially against someone like Grant Enfinger who, Grant hasn't won a race yet this season either, but Grant's been a perpetual, title contender for the last couple seasons in the Truck Series. So, and Brandon Jones doesn't race in the Truck Series all that often, just every now and then. Jones is arguably in the best equipment in the race, and he pulls out a second place finish. Definitely, I mean, he lost to the defending champion, so Not much more to say on that. Can he get to victory lane? Yes. He still hasn't yet, and until he does, I'm not really holding my breath on that one. But going on down the list, looking at some other finishes outside the top five, you had Ty Gilliland, who we've talked about pretty much every week. He brought it home in sixth. Ross Chastain, he was last week's winner. He brought it home in seventh, and I was only 10 points out of being locked in for the championship. Being that Brett Moffitt won, it was something that we mentioned last week was a possibility. Now no longer a possibility because there's not enough races left. But Brett Moffitt becomes a multi-time winner on the season, so we don't have a new winner this week. So we won't have more than 8 winners before the playoff starts. So once Ross gets into the top 20, that's it. He's locked in. There's no way he's missing it. You also had Matt Crafton. He finished in eighth. There are two names here that round out the top 10 that aren't your regular mill of run-of-the-mill drivers. You had Anthony Alfredo and Dylan Lupton. Alfredo was in another DGR Crosley truck in the 15, and Lupton was also in a DGR Crosley truck in the 5. Normally DGR Crosley runs the 17 and the 54, and this week they did run, but they finished third.
They had 4 trucks.
Yeah.
DGR had 4 trucks. That's great. I don't know what their affiliation is, how connected they are with Toyota. But man, they're starting to actually have some decent finishes in those cars. I mean, top 10 is pretty good. All things considered. The 15, I would consider that the third truck after Decker and the 17. Whoever ends up being in that ride for whatever week you're in. I mean, this week it was Ankrum, and he started 4th. So I mean, they're cranking out some pretty fast trucks. So I mean, I don't know if maybe this year we'll see them compete for wins, at least on a consistent basis. I think if they continue this progression, we'll see a win out of that team next year. They've done really well.
Yeah, definitely, and they definitely got to have something good going on that they're bringing 4 trucks to the speedway. So definitely cool to see some new names up in the top 10. One last note that I had on the finishing order. It was heartbreaking to see on the very first lap, he just crossed the start-finish line. Ben Rhodes didn't even have a chance. He shifted up, he upshifted, was getting into gear, and before he even put it into 4th, the truck was smoking across the start-finish line and into turn 1 and had no power, and he pulled it on in, and his day was done just one lap into the event. He started 17th, so it wasn't a great starting position, but he never really had a chance, and it was crazy because his whole team, like all of ThorSport, had engine concerns throughout the night. Matt Crafton had to change an engine before the race, ended up starting in the back. He worked his way back up to 8th, and then at one point Johnny Sauter had the hood up on pit road and fell a couple laps down. So the only truck that didn't have any engine issues got in a wreck, and that was Grant Enfinger. So
yep. It was a good race. I mean, I've said it a couple times. It was a really good race. I mean, the end was kind of lackluster just because Moffitt dominated, but I don't think that disqualifies it as a good race. These trucks are probably the most wild card races. I mean, you got the same 6 to 8 guys winning, but you really don't know which of those guys is going to win. It's not like how Xfinity has become, which we'll talk here in a moment, but it's not like how Xfinity has become when you got these same 3, 4, 5 guys winning week to week to week. I mean, we've still got guys like Harrison Burton and Stuart Friesen and Gilliland, and I mean, there's a bunch of guys that have not won that could easily pull it off next week or the week after that. And we got Canadian Tire Motorsports Park coming up. So I mean, we got some really good wild card races coming up.
Eldora.
Eldora is another one. I think that's where we'll see Friesen shine. Obviously, Him and Matt Crafton. Matt Crafton isn't really known to be like the dirt guy, but he doesn't have a win yet this year, and that could be a place where he can really pull it off. Something that I noticed about him, he's having his best year from an average finish standpoint, even better than his the year he won his championship. He's averaging a 6.4, so he's incredibly consistent this year. So he'll get a win this year. I mean, there's a bunch of guys that'll probably get a win by the end of the year, whether or not they're in the playoffs or not. I think it'll be a really good run to the finish for this season.
I agree with you. I feel like the Truck Series has the most diverse group of like drivers that could find their way to victory lane on any given weekend, and honestly, it just seems like, given the right circumstances, any of the drivers could end up in the front of the field and could wind up in victory lane, depending on, if there's a late caution or if there's different strategy with tires or whatnot. Brett Moffitt, though, he was the winner this week. I'm going to make a note here, and I'm going to tie it all together at the end of the podcast. Brett Moffitt, last year when he was driving for Shiggy Hattori in the 16 truck at Eldora, he was sponsored by iRacing.com. Just remember that little nugget, because I'm going to tie it all together later. We'll talk about Xfinity now, but just remember that Brett Moffitt last year had sponsorship by iRacing. But
love iRacing.
Yes,
getting more involved in it at least. But all right, let's talk Xfinity. Crazy segue here. Cole Custer has been ridiculous the last few weeks. He is lighting the world on fire. I'd say the first half of the first part of the season was Tyler Reddick. In the last few weeks, man, he is just on fire. He wins the what do they call it this year? The give me a name here. Where is it? Camping World 300. Thanks, Marcus Lemonis, for everything that you do. He beats Joey Logano in the 12. So that was one of his few attempts this year. Beats the Cup champion, the defending Cup champion, regardless if it's Xfinity. That's still damn impressive. The whole argument of the Cup guys are here to put the young guys to the test. Well, Custer rose to the test, and he straight smacked them this week.
Yeah, I'm looking at the stats here because unfortunately I didn't get to catch the Xfinity race. I was in a movie theater for the majority of the time that the race was going, but looking at the results here on Racing Reference, Cole Custer led 151 of the 200 laps, and as you mentioned to me before we got this going, it's one of the longest races of the year that the Xfinity guys have. So Cole Custer definitely put a spanking on the field. Going down. Looking at the rest of the finishing order, it wasn't a good day for two of the championship hopefuls. One of them being Justin Allgaier, who was out of the race on lap 127. He got put in the wall around that time after I think he had a run on Jeffrey Earnhardt and just ran out of room and smacked the wall, and it was enough that they couldn't fix it in the time of the damage clock, and they pulled it behind the wall and ended his day. But then after that, at the end of the race, Christopher Bell, who crossed the line in third position, ended up getting disqualified. And a disqualification is grounds for last place points, no stage points whatsoever. So Christopher Bell gets credited with a 38th place finish and only 1 point on the day. So yeah, second disqualification in NASCAR across all three series
since the new rule.
Right, in 2019, and this time it was third place finisher Christopher Bell, and it was for the same thing that Ross Chastain got hit for a couple weeks ago. It was ride height. He was too low in the front, and he was too high in the rear. So, yeah, definitely that caught my eye. After I got out of the movie theater and I looked at the finishing order, I definitely was interested to find out why he had got disqualified, and you know, he didn't even win the race. So it's like, damn, how did the third place guy get knocked and the top two beat him?
Right.
I don't know.
How I think we talked about it when Ross kind of had his issues. How do you feel about even inspecting the cars or trucks or whatever we're running after the race? Do you think that once they pass pre-race inspection, it's kind of all right, boys have at it, let the crew chiefs do whatever craziness they're gonna do, or are you okay with the post-race inspection despite outside forces, damage, just overall wear and tear of the car? Do you feel like uh, this is the way they should do it? This is the way they should penalize drivers in the first place. How do you feel about that? And then I have a couple other points I'd like to make.
Well, honestly, I think that we do need post-race inspection to stop people from doing things they shouldn't be doing. But with that said, I don't know why we have ride height rules in the lower series and we disregard it in the Cup Series. I still don't understand that from what they said, what NASCAR said, the reason that the rule is in place is to save these teams money. And I feel like they're not saving any money for two reasons. One is that, okay, they're not going to let us, have the car as low as we want. Okay, fine. Well, now we have to figure out a technology or perfect a technology that exists and spend money on that will slam the car to the ground and have that ride height be as low as possible in race conditions only, and then bounce back. And
Like coil binding. I mean, that's basically what it does.
yeah,
From what I understand about it.
and that has to cost money to figure out that technology to work for them. I mean, if they just got rid of the whole rule, then they would just be able to slam the cars at the beginning and not have to worry about it coming back up. And I feel like that would just be a cost-effective measure there. The second thing is that it doesn't seem to affect the actual outcome of the race, being that everybody's doing it. So, not saying Joe Gibbs has anything to worry about, but when it happened to Ross, it definitely affected that team where their winnings, they didn't get those winnings. They got last place winnings. It was like they went out and starting parked, but they ran a full race for it. Yeah, Joe Gibbs Racing is going to be better off than Nice Motorsports in this disqualification. And I don't think they even are going to try appealing it just because they know that they're not going to win, because if Ross wasn't going to win, nobody's going to win that type of appeal. But we need inspection, yes, but the type of inspection that we currently have with the ride heights, I'm not going to sit here and be like, I'm not going to say that Christopher Bell and his team cheated on Saturday. I'm going to say a part failed, or I'm going to say something happened where the car, which was legal to start the race, ended up being illegal after the race, and it's like it's an arbitrary thing to me. It doesn't, the punishment does not fit the crime in these two instances.
It's such a You're right about the ride height rule. I don't understand why they have it in Cup and not the other two series. I think they should be a little bit more consistent on that. I honestly think they should have, this is kind of a tangent. I honestly think they should have something that kind of restricts them to smash the cars down just so they can get air underneath the car. Kind of like how the F1 cars do and did back in the 90s, where they have something in the middle that kind of inhibits it from hitting the ground, or at least have some kind of aero independency where there's something maybe in the middle of the car that allows air to get underneath. So because I don't know how many people that are listening understand or remember the X3 test car that they made, but there's a bunch of press reports about it that when they were doing it, there was definitely a sweet spot and it was not smashed to the ground. I think that's something that they need to look at in the future for the racing, just because they shouldn't the way the rules are, it shouldn't be a good thing to smash these cars to the ground. It shouldn't be something that they should be like looking and clamoring for. There should definitely be a sweet spot where the aero and the mechanical grip is hand in hand and whatnot. It's weird just that we've gone this route towards the aerodynamic side of it. Back in the day, I mean, these cars were 3-4 inches off the ground down the straightaways. I mean, I'm sure you remember when they were at Charlotte and the old Charlotte, and they were bouncing up and down the backstretch, and then they would just drop into the corner, and the front would pitch, and the rear end would come up, and it was like just because they had standard suspension. I miss those days, and I think that would actually solve a lot of these issues where they're trying to find every single bit of aero in these cars, whether it's to pin the front down and raise the rear up with these crazy coil bind setups and all this and that. uh, Now, my answer is I do think the post race inspection is important, but I also think there's got to be some common sense involved. If they see it's too low and they see, like, oh, well, it looks like the right front shock got damaged by some debris. Okay, fine, we'll let that go. But I mean, at that point, it starts to become a little bit more of like a what gray area is a gray area. My next thing I wanted to talk about was with Bell going from third to 40th, or however many cars were in the field, 38.
38th.
Uh, Michael Annett led some laps. Michael Annett finished third overall. Michael Annett beat Noah Gragson. He was the highest running JRM car in the race. I don't think when we entered 2019 we'd see Michael Annett even have a win ever. Even if it's at Daytona, it's still a win. I would never have seen, never would have thought I would see Michael Annett finishing third. So good for him. That's awesome. I think he's
Travis Mack.
who?
Travis Mack, his crew chief. That
Uh,
it you gotta go back and see where Travis Mack came in. Travis Mack was Casey Kane's crew chief through most of the season last year in the 95 car, and then abruptly got terminated. And then he came over to the one car, and ever since then they've been building this up. They've been building it and building it, and they started out the year with a victory, and they've been consistently so much better. A crew chief in any series can make all the difference, and I feel like Michael Annett he's got some talent in there,
oh, I
and
agree.
it's showing more because he's got a competent crew chief on his side.
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea about Travis Mack. I've never even heard that name. So I mean, the fact that he shows up and makes that car as impressive as it has, I honestly think, and I don't know if this is a conspiracy or not, but I honestly think Dale has been shorting a net with equipment, just because I don't think I really don't think he's a 12th to 16th place guy, with JRM underneath his name banner. You know, I think he is a top 10 guy, and he's proved it this year. I've always had a kind of a thing for him being underappreciated from a talent perspective. He's definitely one of those like Paul Menard, Brandon Jones kind of guys. James Busher when he had Ream, like he kind of a ride buyer driver. John Westell is another one to think of. He's not. He's actually got some talent. And it's good to see that he beat some really good, like those up and comer kind of guys. He beat Jones, he beat Brandon Jones, he beat Austin Cindric, he beats his own teammate in Gregson, he beat both of the colleague cars, Haley and Chastain. So I mean, he beat Tyler Reddick. I mean, he beat some really good guys in this race. So I think that's one of those feel good stories. We didn't, like I said, Custer ran away with it, but it's a good thing in my opinion to see someone like Annett finally producing the results that I think he can produce on a week to week basis.
There was some strategy involved with getting that third place finish for sure, but his ability to be able to hold on to it at the end of the race and maintain that position definitely does speak volumes. Just for a little bit of background on Travis Mack, He worked with Dale Jr. On the '88 car for a while as a car chief before he got his big break in 2018 with Casey Kane and Levine Family Racing. Like I said, that relationship didn't last the entire season before he moved over to Junior Motorsports and got his full-time crew chiefing gig with Michael Annett to start the 2019 season. And they started the season with a bang with the win in Daytona, and they've just been good. They've been doing really good things all season long. He hasn't been a one and done type of driver. He's still putting results on the table. He's ninth in the standings right now. He's got 4 top 5 finishes, which, looking back over the last 2 seasons with Junior Motorsports, that's 3 more than he got in the other 2 years combined.
Right.
So 11 top 10 finishes. He's got a pole as well. So his one and only pole in the Xfinity series. So definitely things are looking up for Michael Annett. You got to give him credit for his talent, and you also got to give him some credit for having the ability with the crew chief. So Junior Motorsports, they put out good cars. They're one of the top teams in the Xfinity series. You got the Stewart Haas guys, Cole Custer. You got Richard Childress Racing with Tyler Reddick. You got Joe Gibbs Racing with Christopher Bell. You got Penske with Austin Cindric mostly, but whenever they put a Cup guy in one of those cars, you could see them contending for wins with Logano or Keselowski. And then you got Junior Motorsports, and those are really the top 5 teams that will be, competing week in and week out in the Xfinity series, depending on the circumstances. So good to see Michael Annett getting that 3rd place finish for sure.
Yeah, and I really like him. I've said it before. He's someone I think is underappreciated, but I think that's a good way to recap Xfinity. Like we mentioned a couple times, Cole Custer is he's starting to show his. We kind of talked about it in one of our group chats. When we first were introduced to Cole, he was a really quiet, kind of awkward guy, kid, put in better terms, and he's still young. He's still, I think he's 21. Yeah, he's 21 years old, and by all means, that's still scary young in the world of NASCAR. He's starting to show results, and I'm starting to become a believer of him that he could, at some point, whenever there's an opening in Cup, that he's going to be a factor in the future. And regardless of if you think it's the equipment, of course, there's a huge component that's the equipment, but he's outshining his teammate, Chase Briscoe, which he does have. He has a lot of talent as well. He's outshining him by a large margin, and he's up there with the rest of the top 3. You got him, Bell, and Reddick, and we say it every week. It's those 3, and it's going to be. I think it's going to be a battle of. Obviously, I think all 3 of them will get in, but I think it's going to be a battle of who's going to run the high line the best at Homestead here in November between all 3 of them, because they're all just wheelmen in that Xfinity series. So good win for him. They're going to Daytona with Cup next week, so I'm sure we'll see. Maybe we'll see a surprise winner there. Maybe Annett will win again. I hope it's better than what we saw in February. I hope it's because obviously, me being in Florida, I'm going to go. I hope it's more exciting than what we saw in February. So good win for Custer. And now let's get to Cup, because one of my favorite drivers that I don't really
Hold on.
didn't really expect it. What?
Before you go, I do need to make my note on Xfinity series, like I did for the Truck series. I just want to put a pin in it. The Xfinity series, Cole Custer, he got his first career win in 2017 in the Xfinity series at Homestead. That same day, it was William Byron raising the championship trophy. William Byron, everybody knows him. He came from On a Computer. He was very well known for
Yeah.
coming from iRacing.com, from simulations. So there's my little connector there. Now feel free. Let's move on to Cup.
Alex Bowman, your winner this Saturday. Wait, Sunday. Sunday. They ran at night at the end. So I'm a little bit confused. I'm really
Weather.
excited. Yeah, it rained. It rained bad. The Windy City didn't disappoint. Obviously, Joliet's not necessarily Chicago. My God, I don't know if you saw some of the footage, but wow, they recorded like someone said 90 miles an hour. I don't know if that's believable, but I heard 60. That's still pretty crazy for a thunderstorm. But what a race! Probably top three on the year. Probably top two for me, besides maybe Talladega, just because of who won. But what a performance and what a race that we saw on Sunday.
So I ended up missing the very beginning of the race before the weather came. Right as they were just about to get the command to go racing, we ended up having a squall come out here on Long Island, and it knocked out our power in our store for the rest of the day. So I didn't get to see any action from. I think they were doing the grid walk, or not the grid walk, but they were going up and down the grid at the time when the power had gone out in my store. So I didn't get to see Jimmy Johnson lead the first couple of laps, which was really cool to see in itself. But then they had their really big storm in Chicago. There were car covers flying off because it was that windy. I think a pit box fell down. The NBC pit box ended up falling down or something.
Yep.
It was absolute insanity. They told everybody to find shelter, just because this storm that was coming through was nothing to sneeze at. Eventually, they did get the track dried, and what was it, around like 7 o'clock or
7:20, something like that. Yeah, Eastern.
Yeah, they finally got the race restarted, and it was, like you said, it was a really good race. You and I were both watching it while we were racing ourselves at our own Chicagoland Speedway in the FTF Racing League. So,
And the winner was
Kevin McAdams in the number
Damn right.
26 Speed Inc. Chevrolet.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was. We had a good race too, but we're talking about the NASCAR race, which ended before ours, and it was Alex Bowman who was the winner in that number 88 Exalta Chevrolet. So, from what I saw while I was watching it, I had it on my TV above my racing screen. Just the racing that was going on, you really got to give credit where credit's due. The package worked. It worked in this instance with these conditions. It clicked. It did. Was it perfect? No. And will it ever be perfect? No. But in this instance, it was really good. Where in the closing laps, Kyle Larson's coming, and he's got a head of steam, and he passes Alex Bowman and takes the lead. Any other race at any time in the last couple of years, you would have thought, all right, Larson's got it. He has the faster car. Aero push isn't going to allow Alex Bowman to even have a chance to stay within a second of him. Good win, Larson. And that was with 8 laps to go. Yep. And then all of a sudden, Bowman just changes up his line. He goes into a different line, and he starts getting momentum back. And he gets up off of turn 2 a couple laps later. And Larson's not like falling off or anything. He's just running his normal stuff. But Bowman just found that extra gear. And he goes and he makes a move and he side drafts Larson. They make a little bit of contact too down the back straight. And all of a sudden Bowman's back in the lead. And you're like, whoa. No, that doesn't.
You haven't seen that in years.
Yeah, you never would have thought that would have happened. And Bowman goes on and he stretches his lead back out over Larson, because I don't even think Larson thought that it was possible. I think Larson was thinking the same thing that we were, where I just got to get around him. Once I get around him, it's over. And no, Bowman proved us all wrong. And it was incredible to see. It was incredible action all throughout the night, but especially there at the end with Bowman and Larson racing for that victory. Alex Bowman picks up his first career NASCAR Cup Series victory here at Chicagoland Speedway. Definitely like you said, one of the top races of the season, and it definitely doesn't hurt that it's a first-time winner in Victory Lane. That helps me think that way. But I mean, the race itself, the racing itself, really, I enjoyed it from start to beginning, from start to end. You had at the very beginning of the race, before the stage end, you had guys that were out there on old tires, and you were thinking who's going to make it, who's not. You had some people blowing the right rear tire, but not bringing out the caution. And then eventually Clint Boyer, he did blow his right rear tire and shredded the thing, and ended up bringing out the caution that would eventually end up the stage, with Denny Hamlin being the winner in that one. Then you go on to stage two, and Kevin Harvick, who was strong the entire night, he ends up winning stage two, pretty handedly. And then all of a sudden, stage three, you got Bowman. He's in the picture, and he's got the lead. And Harvick, he's trying to get it back, and he screws up and he hits the wall pretty hard, in turn two, and that was pretty much the end of Harvick. Then you had it was pretty much the Bowman show for the rest of the night after that, until Larson showed up again, and it was. Like I said, it was fun to watch. There were 23 lead changes, which is definitely a lot more than we're used to seeing, especially at Chicagoland. I mean, last year was the exception because they had the slide job, and that was a really good race because of how hot it was and how slick it was, and those conditions really worked well with that package. So they had 24 lead changes last year, but the years prior to that, 12 lead changes, 17 lead changes, 17 lead changes. So it definitely it worked itself out, and it was really cool to see not only Bowman get the victory, but all of Hendrick Motorsports have a very competitive day.
Yeah, I was actually going to talk about Hendrick here in a second, but the one thing that it's hard to really look as far as stats go and see, oh, well, there's 20 lead changes. How could you say it was a bad race? Oh, there's 15 lead changes. How could you say it's a bad race? They're passing for the lead. Well, we need to remember, like in most of these cases, a lot of the time it's pit cycles, it's
Mm-hmm.
people staying out for stage points, it's people staying out uh, under caution, trying to get that one lap. A lot of the times it's something like that. And that's why most of the time it's an elevated amount. But in this case, uh, just looking at a lot of these lead changes, most of them were legitimate. You had Austin Dillon getting passed by Johnson, Johnson getting passed again by Dillon. Here comes Harvick. Harvick leads up to the end of stage one. But then you had William Byron and Harvick duking it out 3, 4, 5 laps in a row, and they made it really fun through stage two. And I mean, there were legitimate lead changes at a 1.5 mile track, and it seems like the recipe for this package are two things. It's a track that allows them to go wide open, and it's a track that allows them to go at least three different routes in the corner. You got the middle, you got the bottom, and you got the top. The fact that a track like Chicago, it's one of the few tracks that have multi-groove racing without the progressive banking, it's pretty amazing. And I hope the track looks really good, minus a couple places that they've had to patch. It looks really good, and I hope they leave it alone for as long as they can, similar to Atlanta. It was a damn good race. And like you mentioned, the Gen 7 cannot come soon enough. They got to do something about the aero push. But a track like this, a track like Kansas, which we saw really good racing there as well, it lends, when it's cold or when it's dark, it
Nighttime is the
lends
right time.
it. Larry Mack says it perfect. It lends itself to be a very competitive race, and it lends it like And I think these teams are starting to figure out a little bit better how to create a better balanced car in traffic. Obviously, if you're going to lose 800, 900 pounds of downforce, speed is speed, downforce is downforce. But it seems that they're starting to slowly figure it out. They're slowly starting to find a compromise and how to combat this dirty air that's so prevalent behind another car. And the best way to do it, and we saw it with Larson and Bowman, just run a different lane. And most of the time, they would get a run either running high or they would slingshot it down low underneath the guy. And all it takes is you getting next to him and making a pass. And we saw that a bunch of times. We saw Byron do it. We saw Johnson and Dillon going back and forth. We saw Bowman and Larson doing it at the end. There was a lot of really, really good green flag passes for the lead. And we haven't had that in years in Cup. And that's really sad to say. We haven't had that in a very long time. And I will give NASCAR credit where credit is due. This package straight up works from an entertainment perspective and from keeping the guys close. I mean, they obviously have to do some kind of work around with it. They have to run different lines. I would love to see someone just get right on the back of somebody and get them loose like we saw back in the old days. And by old days, I mean early 2000s. But it lended itself to be a really good race. And you touched on it there at the very end. Hendrick Motorsports is coming back to life. The fact that we were shocked to see Jimmy Johnson leading a race in 2019, a 7-time champion, is a bit perplexing. But we saw him lead laps. We saw him finish in the top 5. Obviously, Bowman comes out the victor, but then you have Byron. Byron led some laps in the middle of stage 2. And had it not been for a wild restart that moved him back from the top 2 all the way back to 8th or ninth, he might have been up there as well, battling for the win. So, and Chase was up there at some point. He finished 11th, but I mean, that's not bad considering there was a time that Hendrick, the best car in their stable, would finish 11th. We're not even talking. We're talking about earlier this year and last year. It's just crazy that they've obviously figured something out, and I'm excited because it just adds another team into the mix. It's not just here's Gibbs or here's Stuart Haas and here's Penske. It's not going to be just those guys. Now you got Hendrick in the mix, and I'm hoping at some point that we see Byron in victory lane. I'd love to see Jimmy back in victory lane just for the sake of competitiveness. And I hope they've got the Q speed down, but I hope Childress comes out of nowhere and brings some competitive race rides to these races, because I want to see 14 to 16 guys able to win every week like we used to see. So I mean, the series is in a step in the right direction as far as a competitive standpoint. Everyone knows that I'm a huge critic of this car. Everyone knows I'm a huge critic of this package, but they definitely did it right this year at the 1.5 mile tracks when it's wide open and when there's multiple grooves, and it gives me some hope that Homestead is still going to be a great race for the end of the year.
I wrote a column back after Atlanta, and a lot of people were talking about how, because of their performance exiting Atlanta, that Hendrick Motorsports just they weren't gonna be good again in 2019. And I said, hold on a second. Yeah, the results at Atlanta were definitely a abysmal day for the Hendrick Motorsports guys, because their best finish on that day in Atlanta was 15th, and none of them led any laps. I don't think any of them finished on the lead lap. And they just came off their worst season to date in 2018. So, everybody was really quick to, put the fork in Hendrick Motorsports and say, yep, they're done. They're not going to be anything this season. But then you had Chase's win at Talladega, and then everybody's like, oh yeah, they won at Talladega, but Talladega's a super speedway race, so you really can't count that. So, but you look at the other 1.5 mile races where they did well at Texas, they did well at Kansas, and they come out the victor at Chicagoland. And that's where I'm seeing that anybody who thought earlier in the season that they weren't going to be able to compete in the 2019 season, they got to think again, because Hendrick Motorsports is coming back. They're a championship caliber team, and nobody knew how long it was going to be before they were back, but I will gladly say that they are back now. They are here. They are ready to compete with Gibbs. They are here to compete with Penske. They're here to compete with Stewart-Haas. And I'm looking forward to it, because it now brings a third manufacturer into the mix. All we've been talking about all season is the Toyota dominance, the Ford dominance, specifically the Gibbs and the Penske dominance between the two of them. Yeah, Stewart-Haas has been there on the Ford side, but they haven't gotten a victory yet this season. And yeah, Kyle Larson's been there on the Chevy side, but he's had more bad luck than anybody can count. But Hendrick Motorsports, specifically Alex Bowman, I think now that Bowman has a win in his pocket, I think they're going to come a lot more easy for him now. And I'm looking forward to it, especially Kentucky, another mile and a half at night. Kentucky's never given us a good race, but I can't help but be optimistic for it because of the races that we've had so far this season at the mile and a halves.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit more pessimistic because Kentucky's is similar to Texas in the sense
But
that,
Texas was a good race.
well, here's the reason why I don't think it's going to be, unless they do something to the track like they did at Texas. Texas used the PJ1. I think Kentucky's going to have to do something identical. Kentucky's a little bit different. Kentucky's got, I think it's 18. It's 18 or 20 in the corner in 1 and 2. I think it's 18. I could be wrong. It's pretty much a low line fest there. 3 and 4, still 14 degrees. 3 and 4 is kind of interesting because obviously they repaved it, but it's still got a lot of character, like it was back before the repave, and it kind of started to show a little bit of life in the second groove last year. Funny enough, someone that I saw using the second groove pretty well were Bowman and Larson, the two guys that ran up front at Chicago. So I gotta see first to believe that we'll see something decent at Kentucky, just because I think they're gonna have to present the PJ1 again when all else fails. Bring out the drag strip stickiness. It definitely helps, and I think it will if they bring it to Kentucky. But hey, anything is possible with this package at this point, and it produced a damn good race here, and I think it'll produce another damn good race at Daytona because finally they have some suck. They got the suck back at the plate track. So I think we're gonna obviously have a good race. I hope at least at Daytona, and I think we might see a pretty surprising result at Kentucky if we're optimistic.
I can't help but be optimistic. I didn't think that any of the mile and a half races were going to be anything to talk about this season, and I've been definitely proven wrong on that one. But I've said it in the trucks and the Xfinity, so I'll say my piece now for the Cup Series. Alex Bowman was your winner on Sunday night, and Alex Bowman's connection to sim racing is that he was the simulator driver for Hendrick Motorsports. He drove all the simulators for them in 2017 before he got his full-time ride with the company in 2018. So that's now 3 series that we've talked about tonight. Where are you going
with this, Justin?
All right, I'll bring it all together now because I'm excited to talk about it because it brings it together for me and you and everybody else in the sim racing world, that sim racing really has got its hold on real life racing, where the two are starting to intertwine in a way where it's becoming almost mainstream. You look at not only in the 3 series that we've talked about, but you look at ARCA, which raced on Thursday night. Ty Majeski was the winner. And if anybody's ever raced on iRacing and looked at the iRatings page, you'll see Ty Majeski not only first but second. He's got the top two positions on the iRacing iRating chart. He's got the two highest iRatings with his two accounts. Um, and Ty Majeski was able to win the Bounty 150 at Chicagoland. You look at the Formula One race in Austria, Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen, along with Lando Norris, they frequent iRacing a lot lately. They just did a 6-hour race. I can't remember exactly which one it was, but I mean,
I think it was at Watkins Glen.
it might have been at Watkins Glen where they were teammates and they put on a really good show. We're talking about like the every single one of these races. We're talking about like some of the best drivers have some type of connection to sim racing, and my whole point is that we've got the iRacing Peak Series, we've got the Peak Antifreeze Series, we've got the eNASCAR Heat Series, unfortunately, but we've got this hold now in esports where we're promoting it in a way that it has never been promoted before, and I absolutely love it. And I feel like the more we talk about it, the more that we bring up that, and I know it's definitely run its course with William Byron, because every time anybody talks about William Byron, it's, oh, William Byron on a computer. Yeah, I get that, but iRacing sponsored Brett Moffitt back last year at Eldora and put their logo on his truck. And there are plenty of drivers in the truck series, some younger drivers, that go on iRacing to learn the track because they've never been there before. And iRacing, I've seen their logo specifically come up on like the broadcasts, the Fox broadcasts before they went off air. They're sponsoring like the ticker. So my whole point is that a lot of the newer guard has got such a connection to sim racing, and that's been our life for like the last 12 years.
Yeah.
That I'm just absolutely in love with it. I'm so happy to see it finally. It's happening. They've had the Peak Series winner come out to Homestead every year to accept his winnings, which has been really cool. But I want to see more. I want to see them talk about it. I want at one point I want to say that, hey, you know how they talk about like Larson just went to the dirt track and he raced the dirt series before he came and raced. I want them to talk about what they did online. I want them to say, hey, we had, last night we had Derek Kraus, who won the K&N race on over the weekend. He was racing over at Martinsville with the trucks, and he was able to win over his competition, which had high I rating. I want to see more. And they have on NBC, they have the Parker Kligerman, who owns a team in the iRacing series. But a lot of these tracks, coming up, he'll go in the simulator and he'll show how to race it with a lot of the Peak guys will go in it. And I don't really have a point to it anymore. I just kind of went on a tangent, but I just wanted everybody to know that there is a connection with sim racing and real racing, and everybody who is saying that, because I've seen a lot of negative thoughts about sim racing as well, a lot from the older guard, and them saying, oh, well, they don't know how to race correctly, they just know how to hot lap or whatever. But that's not truly the case. You're getting a lot of winners, a lot of champions from the online crowd, and I love it. That's really all I gotta say.
I earlier this year, I've been running iRacing, which is probably the highest of the high as far as online sim racing is concerned, especially on the oval side of things. I mean, you got Assetto Corsa, R Factor 2, Race Room. You got a bunch of places to do road racing. as well as iRacing. I had the pleasure of racing William Byron, something that you never would think of it. Racing a Cup Series driver in a race on iRacing. It was their NASCAR iRacing series where you just hop in and everyone gets the same setup and everyone just goes and races and I actually beat him. It was one of those things where it was pretty surreal just because you see, oh well, that guy's a cup guy. I mean, he's young and he's obviously got something that I don't, and that's connections and money and all this and that. And he's had opportunities, but it's so cool to be able to race someone like him. I've raced AJ Allmendinger. I've raced him a few times. I've raced Noah Gregson a few times online. I've seen Max Verstappen in lobbies for the roadside. I've raced and practiced with him. Van Gisbergen on the supercar side over in Australia. I've seen him on there. It's just crazy, like you mentioned, it's just crazy that our world of sim racing, we've been doing this for 12 years, and I think it's safe to say that this is probably uh, our first true, like, this is how we met. This is how we met a bunch of our very good and basically our best friends. We hang out with people we've met on here 12, 13 years ago, and we're going on vacations, and this is our life. Like, we've done this for so long, and like you mentioned, it's so neat and it's so cool to see what iRacing is becoming. You got someone like Parker Kligerman, Clint Boyer, Austin Dillon. You've got Roush, you got Gibbs. You got these big, and you got other esports teams. These huge teams and these huge organizations providing sponsorship and money and equipment. I heard from the Richmond guys, Malik Ray's on that team and Jimmy Mullis is on that team. They basically asked those two that they drafted, "Hey, what do you need? You need a new computer? You need a new setup? We'll do anything to make you the best sim racer you can be." And it's just wild that these guys are racing for over $100,000 on a video game every other Tuesday. It's wild to hear someone like Bobby Zelensky, who I've raced with him on iRacing off and on for years. Someone like him racing the iconic 18 car for Gibbs. It's just a why. It's like Dale Jr. has obviously been involved in sim racing since I can remember. I remember hearing about Dirty Mo Posse, and if you're in that league, you're the best of the best. I mean, there are guys that are legends in this side of the world that ran that league, and now he's got his own team on there. So it's just insane to see the technology of sim racing going over into the real racing aspect, something that's starting to become more common, or something called, I don't know if you've ever heard of them before, but direct drive wheels.
Hmm.
Essentially, it's like that's like the ultimate, like, you feel everything. You get the sensation of how a car feels, at least as close as you can get in your hands. There are motion simulators that you can buy as a consumer. They're expensive, but we're starting to get as close to the real thing at a consumerist price for everyone. And it's just incredible to see technology and the immersion of sim racing and the combination of that and real racing become a true thing. It's just I think you uh 2 or 3 months ago, you called into Dave Moody's radio show, and he asked, like, who's the next person you would want to see be an up and comer, and you brought up Ray Alfala.
Yep.
That dude has won 4 championships in peak. Back when I was around, and they had, it was called DWC, and he raced some really good guys back then, and he's racing some really good guys now. He's somebody that I agree with you. If you put him in a cup car tomorrow and said, "All right, go. You're in the 22 car. We're gonna let Joey Logano rest a week." I honestly think he would finish in the top 10, and I think you would agree with me, just because A lot of the stuff that translates from sim racing, there's a lot of instincts and there's a lot of habits that you learn on here that translates very well into the real world. I mean, you got like a guy like Timmy Hill in peak. He runs peak and then he runs cup. It's the same thing for him. So it's just wild. It's just wild, and I appreciate you bringing this up because I get to rant about something that I enjoy on two sides. You got real racing, and you got sim racing, and I think that was a really good thing that you did there.
Yeah, man, I couldn't have said it any better than you did there. It's just it's definitely really cool to see, and I look forward to watching it, continue to evolve. Today I had two people that I was helping get set up. Now, granted, one of them was RNC, our buddy, and he's just looking for a new computer at this point. But we were helping him trying to figure out what's going to be best for him to have the best experience for as cheap as he possibly can. So I spent some time with him, but and then one of the guys who came and did photography for us for TRE a couple times this season. He messaged me out of the blue today, and he's like, "Hey, how can I get set up with doing some iRacing?" And granted, I'm not an iRacing expert by any means. I'm an NR 2003 expert, but not an iRacing. But I can get somebody set up. I can tell them, hey, look for a computer that can have this. And if you don't believe me, go to iRacing's website. They actually give you tips and what you should have as like minimum settings for a computer, and then a wheel. Here are some good entry level wheels if you're not looking to like go fully immersed like I am with my 49-inch widescreen and racing rig complete setup. Like, no, I don't expect anybody to just drop like as much money as I have over the years right away, but somebody as like an entry level to get acclimated with it. I got this guy set up for less than $500 today. So, that's it's attainable. You can't the days of, working in the shop and putting a car together and going to race your local short track. Those days are pretty much coming to an end because one, there's not a lot of local short tracks that you could just do that have like series that are open, and two, even to do that, it costs a lot of money, and you still gotta fit some type of template and rules package and whatnot to be able to do it, at these local tracks. So I'm not knocking local short track racing at all. I'm just saying that it's very difficult to do that. Whereas with something like iRacing, you can just go on your computer, hook up a wheel, and go racing. And a lot of these kids, a lot of these drivers, a lot of these champions that are coming through the ranks, that's where they got their start. You even look at a lot of the drivers that are currently in the series, in the Cup Series, that raced in the DMP series that you mentioned. Brad Keselowski, Martin Truex Jr. I think Denny Hamlin was part of it as well.
Yeah, he was.
So like, just looking at it like that, I mean, yeah, they're kind of on the older side of the current field, but even they have some sim racing background to them. Even though I don't want to say it's just NR 2003 because you and I still race that religiously, and it's still a really good testament to skill. But that's evolved now into iRacing, and a lot of the newer guard is coming up through iRacing, and it's just real cool. And I like I said before, I can't wait to see it evolve and continue on.
It I think it's another platform, and then we've heard some stories. I remember hearing about an esports guy from, I think it was F1 2018, beating a guy who runs Formula E in real life, and I think we're going to start hearing that more often. Yeah, I think it's going to become the new normal. blah blah blah. He runs F1 2019, beats Formula 2 champion in Race of Champions race or whatever.
Hmm.
I think we're gonna start seeing that more often, and unfortunately, I love going to. I mean, I'm going to New Smyrna Speedway this Thursday for Fourth of July, and I love short track racing, and I hope it does it sticks around for as long as it does, and I hope it's something that I can enjoy well into my adulthood, and I hope it sticks around. But I think you're right. This generation, my generation, your generation, we don't have uh, the resources. It's not something that you or I were born into. We weren't born into a family of money. And oh, Dad, let's go racing. All right, son, what do you want to do? You want to run a late model? All right, let me write a check for 100 grand, and we'll run our local short track. It's not that easy. It's not something that's feasible. But what's feasible is saving your money and getting a decent computer, getting a decent wheel, getting a decent setup, and going online and racing. And you get to do it with the best. Like I mentioned, we're talking about professionals. Max Verstappen, AJ Allmendinger, Shane Van Gisbergen, Noah Gragson, William Byron. These guys who are household names in their respective series. You get to go online and hey, it might be a random Tuesday at 11 p.m. like it is now, and you hop on iRacing and you get in the Daytona lobby, and guess what? You might see a NASCAR driver in there, or an IndyCar driver, or an FIA WEC driver, or a Formula One driver. Even it's just a wild time to live, and I think it's just going to get better, and I think it's going to become more prevalent, and I think we'll see at some point. Someone that you didn't mention. I mean, you might have mentioned. Did you mention TJ Majors?
I didn't mention TJ Majors, but I mean, yeah, he's another great example, and
Yeah.
he's not even in a car every week, but he's a spotter. But I mean, he's a great iRacer as well.
Yeah. So I mean, you got like these crazy connections to sim racing all over the place, and I think it's just going to get bigger. I wouldn't be surprised within the next decade seeing a guy from an iRacing team, especially with these direct connections, becoming a developmental driver in real life, in whether it's trucks or Xfinity or Cup. I mean, it's just something that it's something that we got to look at as a possibility. I mean, money talks, and obviously they're gonna have to get something together similar to what Ross Chastain has had to deal with in his racing career. You got to get sponsorship, you got to get money in there, but I think at some point we'll see somebody from the sim racing world who goes straight from sim racing into a high end ride, whether it's trucks, Cup, Xfinity, even Canon. I consider that a very high tier ride in comparison to late models or legends or bandoleros at summer shootout at Charlotte. I think that's something we'll see very soon.
I hope so. I definitely do. Um, Looking forward to this upcoming weekend. It is Daytona week. We're getting Daytona, and it's going to be the first race at Daytona without restrictor plates. They're going to have the tapered spacers, and we're going to have a package similar to what we had at Talladega. Probably going to have the wicker bills on the spoilers, really
They
high
are.
high spoilers.
They are. They are. They confirmed it a couple days ago that they're going to run the same package at as they did at Talladega.
And
So
it's going to be at night, and it's going to be the right time, and it just seems as of late, even with the older packages, that the July race has always been way more exciting than the 500. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm really looking forward to the Xfinity Series race as well. The Firecracker 250 the night before. They'll be racing Friday night and Saturday night this weekend, which will be July 5th and July 6th. Of course, America's birthday is Thursday, 2 days from now, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the weekend, and what's over there.
yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm here. I live in pretty not to dox myself, but I live in Deltona. Try and find me if you can. I don't have anything posted anywhere, so have fun. Send me some free stuff. I'm going to Xfinity, and I'm going to the Cup race. I honestly, just to kind of put a prediction, I do think Xfinity is going to be kind of lackluster, and then unless they're super aggressive like they were at Talladega, they've kind of messed with the front bumpers to create a lot of front downforce, or I guess like a front disturbance to kind of push the car out away from it because they're so hell bent on not letting these cars tandem. Whatever the reason is beyond me at this point. It doesn't make the race any safer. In my opinion. So it'll be a waiting game for me to see how good it is. I mean, I thought Daytona was egregious. Seeing them just run single file like that, I really hope that we don't see that. We got a couple new guys. You got Austin Hill running for Shiggy Hattori's first ever Xfinity race. You got AJ Allmendinger coming back to NASCAR, of all places at a restrictor plate, or in this case, just a regular super speedway. Uh, it's gonna be, uh, I think it's gonna be decent, if I'm honest. But I hope it's amazing. I always hope the racing is good there, just because I live here. Cup is gonna be. I would not be surprised if it's the best 400 we've seen since 2011 with the tandems. I think if they are as racy as they were at Talladega, we could see 50 or more lead changes, which would just that would get my rocks off because man, I do love me some good super speedway racing, and I love me some lead changes. So I think, barring any rain that always shows up at Daytona, I think it's going to be a great weekend, and I think it's going to be a fun Fourth of July weekend for everybody.
I sure hope so. I really got nothing else for the rest of the night. You got anything else to add, Kev?
I think we're good. Like I mentioned, all this podcast, and I really, and something I've mentioned every week, I really enjoy watching these races, and I really hope at some point this I think we got something good here, and I really hope that we get some notoriety, and I hope that we get the attention that we both want, and I hope that the people that do watch, I really greatly appreciate it, whether it's 5 people or 50 people or 5,000 people, whatever it is, uh, that continues to listen to us. I greatly appreciate those who listen to us and are giving us a chance to entertain you and provide you some insight that you might not have had before listening to us. We're doing this because it's fun, but we're also doing this because we want to entertain you. So thanks to everyone who supports us on Facebook, who shows up and interacts with us on Twitter, and those of you who watch us week to week. We do greatly appreciate it.
Yes, I echo those sentiments. It was cool over the week. The big heads at NASCAR and some journalists over at The Athletic were talking 2021 schedule ideas. And we had talked about it the week before. So maybe we had an influence, maybe we didn't. Maybe it was coincidence, but I'd tend towards the former. I think maybe our word got out there and somebody it caught somebody's eye and just started spreading like wildfire. So hopefully we have some type of influence out there, and it continues to grow. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm Justin Melillo. That's Kevin McAdams. Have a wonderful everything.
Goodbye.